Imagine sitting on your couch watching yet another headline roll across the news. Someone in power, supposedly well-informed, makes a call that anyone with a grain of common sense can tell will lead to disaster. You shrug. You scroll. Not long after, you're browsing social media and your well-meaning aunt, the one who bakes cookies and remembers your birthday, posts a warning about some outlandish theory. She's dead serious. At work, there's that overly confident colleague again, giving out financial advice like he's an expert, advice so reckless it could destroy someone's savings in a single move. The thread connecting all of these situations isn't villainy. These people aren't plotting to create harm. That would in some ways be easier to understand. No, what's at play is something much more unsettling. They're absolutely certain they're doing the right thing, and that unshakable confidence in the absence of accuracy is what makes them so dangerous. Take a moment to revisit one of the darkest moments in modern history, the Chernobyl nuclear catastrophe of 1986. While it's true that Soviet-era secrecy and institutional dysfunction played major roles, what really set off the chain reaction wasn't sabotage or corruption. It was a group of professionals, engineers and supervisors carrying out what they believed was a routine test. They didn't see the consequences coming. Officials delayed critical evacuations not out of cruelty, but out of a desire to avoid public hysteria. They thought they were doing the responsible thing. That misplaced belief in their own correctness is what made it so tragic. This wasn't a grand evil scheme, it was a human failure of judgment. And that's the point. It wasn't monsters at work. It was ordinary people acting with flawed certainty. There's even a term for this perilous blend of ignorance and overconfidence: the Dunning-Kruger effect. Researchers from Cornell University identified this pattern, where individuals with limited ability in a given area actually rate their expertise much higher than reality supports. What's worse, this phenomenon doesn't stay confined to the people making the bad calls. It spills out, affecting whole communities, organizations, and even nations. And now, in an era where information spreads like wildfire through social networks, poor decision-making isn't limited to personal consequences. Today, someone's misguided post can go viral, reshaping narratives and influencing thousands or millions of others. This amplifies the impact of faulty thinking in ways our ancestors could never have imagined. Let's dig deeper. Social media isn't built to showcase the truth. It's engineered for clicks, shares, and engagement. Algorithms don't care whether something is accurate. They care if it sparks emotion. That outrage, that thrill, that sense of urgency. It's rewarded with more visibility. A landmark MIT study from 2018 examined how stories travel on Twitter. The researchers found that falsehoods didn't just spread faster, they were shared 6 times more than factual stories. And it wasn't robots doing the work. It was regular folks, convinced they were helping by sharing something they believed was important. This isn't just a Twitter issue. A joint study by New York University and Princeton in 2019 discovered similar trends on Facebook. Lies, particularly during politically sensitive times like elections, were 6 times more likely to be shared than truths. What's especially disturbing is that most of this misinformation doesn't come from people trying to manipulate others. It comes from individuals who think they're being helpful. They believe they're protecting others, sounding alarms, raising awareness, but in reality they're often doing the exact opposite. That's what makes this so difficult to tackle. It's not a conspiracy, it's sincerity gone awry. It's what happens when good intentions meet flawed thinking, and the brain itself contributes to the mess. See, when we encounter information that agrees with what we already believe, our brains reward us. We get a little shot of dopamine, the same chemical that drives addictive behavior. This biological reward system encourages us to keep seeking out similar content and to share it, regardless of whether it's true. People with weaker critical thinking skills fall more easily into this trap. They're more likely to mistake emotional intensity for truth. Over time, this creates a kind of echo chamber inside the mind, reinforcing bad ideas and rejecting anything that challenges them. Think about how often you've seen someone comment on an article based only on the headline, clearly having not read a single paragraph. Or how you've watched otherwise intelligent individuals fall for scams or pseudoscience because it fits their worldview. What we're dealing with isn't classic stupidity. It's something more systemic, a misalignment between how people perceive their knowledge and what they actually know, all supercharged by systems that reward quick reactions over thoughtful reflection. This pattern doesn't just persist, it deepens. In 1976, Carlo Cipolla, an Italian economic historian, laid out what he called the basic laws of human stupidity. It sounds humorous at first glance, but his analysis was serious and insightful. His premise was simple. Human society is perennially underestimated in terms of how many individuals walk around with faulty judgment. Even the most cynical among us still place too much faith in others' capacity for rational thought. We assume wrongly that given enough facts, people will make reasonable choices. But as Cipolla noted, that assumption breaks down constantly in real life. He argued that the potential for poor reasoning exists independently of education, wealth, or social standing. A Nobel Prize winner is just as capable of making a devastatingly poor decision as someone who never finished school. Credentials are not a shield against bad thinking. According to Cipolla, true stupidity reveals itself when someone causes harm to others without any benefit to themselves, and often suffers harm in the process. Unlike selfish individuals who act in their own interest, or ignorant individuals who might at least learn from their mistakes, these people are operating on pure delusion. They believe they're helping, even as their actions sabotage everything around them, including themselves. Another critical point Cipolla made is that society as a whole underestimates the destructive power of these people. We assume no one could possibly act in ways that are both harmful and pointless, and so we're caught off guard when they do. Because their behavior doesn't follow rational patterns, it's almost impossible to anticipate or prepare for. And that unpredictability makes them more dangerous than the greedy or the malicious. His fifth and most unsettling conclusion was that people prone to this kind of consistent misjudgment pose a greater threat to stability than criminals. Why? Because their mistakes don't follow any coherent goal. They often appear noble, well-meaning, or driven by values, and this camouflage makes them harder to challenge and easier to trust. It's not that they're bad people, it's that their certainty is misplaced and they refuse to question it. To further illustrate this, Cipolla mapped out 4 general categories of human behavior based on who benefits or suffers from a person's actions. First, there are the creators, people whose efforts improve both their lives and the lives of others. These are the innovators, the public servants, the compassionate leaders. Jonas Salk, for instance, who developed the polio vaccine and gave it away without a patent. Or Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the World Wide Web and made it freely accessible. Their actions uplift everyone. Then there are the exploiters, people who benefit themselves at the expense of others. Think of a CEO who cuts safety measures to increase profits, or a politician who stirs division for votes. These individuals are predictable. You can guard against them because you understand their motivations. Systems can be designed to contain their reach. Regulations, checks, and accountability measures work here. The third type is more complex. The self-sacrificers. These are people who help others to their own detriment. Healthcare workers who run themselves into burnout during a crisis. Parents who neglect their own health and joy for the sake of their children. employees who take on too much work until they collapse. While these people may seem noble, they inadvertently reinforce unhealthy systems, and in the long run, their sacrifices can become counterproductive. Finally, we arrive at the most troubling category: those who cause damage to others while also harming themselves, all while believing they're making things better. Picture parents who refuse to vaccinate their children because of discredited fears. They don't want harm, they're just scared and misinformed, but their choices endanger others and themselves. They waste money, risk their kids' lives, and expose their communities. There's no benefit, no villainy, just a tangled web of fear, certainty, and flawed thinking. Research shows that people with weak reasoning skills often make moral decisions that, to them, feel righteous, even when those choices result in clear harm. They lack the capacity to fully map out the consequences, but they're driven by emotion and a distorted sense of ethics. And this creates something more dangerous than malice: chaos disguised as virtue. This is why poor judgment is such a threat. When you're dealing with a criminal, you know what they want, and you can plan around that. But when you're dealing with someone who genuinely believes their bad idea is a gift to the world, there's no predicting what they'll do next. They support policies that harm their own communities. They amplify lies while thinking they're fighting for truth. They are, effectively, human catalysts for systemic collapse. One of the most famous economic meltdowns in history, the Dutch tulip craze, was fueled by this kind of misguided optimism. Families sold everything they owned to buy flower bulbs, convinced that they were securing their future. It wasn't greed, it was blind belief. And when the bubble burst, it ruined thousands. Their intentions were good, their judgment wasn't. What's worse is that this pattern spreads. While bad intentions often provoke resistance, bad ideas wrapped in good intentions slip past defenses. When someone you trust shares misinformation, you're more likely to believe it. The illusion of sincerity gives it power. This is just the beginning. In the next part, we'll dive further into the emotional mechanisms and social dynamics that fuel poor judgment, and how modern systems, from politics to technology, are built in ways that unintentionally reward the worst cognitive habits. Stay with me. Let's explore what fuels these cycles of misguided confidence and why they're not just lingering, but accelerating across every corner of our interconnected world. Poor judgment isn't just a glitch in human thinking. It's a feature that finds fertile ground in our psychology, our institutions, and the very tools we use every day. And perhaps most troubling, the very platforms we turn to for information often turn out to be the biggest amplifiers of these mental blind spots. Every time someone posts a piece of content that confirms another person's already held belief, no matter how flawed, it delivers a mental reward. That small, satisfying release of dopamine makes them feel validated. In a strange way, misinformation becomes emotionally addictive. It's not just a misunderstanding of facts, it's the emotional high that keeps people hooked. As strange as it sounds, sharing something untrue can feel just as good as discovering something insightful, sometimes better, because it aligns perfectly with one's internal narrative. This kind of psychological reinforcement creates a cycle. People feel smarter and more engaged when their views are echoed. If something disagrees with them, especially when it's presented calmly and rationally, it's often seen not as helpful correction, but as an attack. Their natural response: defend harder, double down, find another article, meme, or video that strengthens their position. Their confidence grows, while the accuracy of their beliefs does not. The brain isn't evaluating evidence, it's defending its comfort zone. This is why you might see highly educated people fall for astonishingly obvious scams or believe wild conspiracies when they're outside their professional comfort zones. Expertise in one area doesn't automatically transfer to others. Someone might be brilliant in chemistry and still fall for a financial hoax. Another might lead a Fortune 500 company and share absurd political misinformation online. This isn't about intelligence, it's about cognitive discipline, the ability to question your own thinking and resist the lure of easy emotional rewards. And when emotion hijacks reason, things get dangerous fast. To understand how this dynamic plays out on a systemic level, let's revisit Cipolla's idea but add some modern context. In many ways, our world is structured in ways that reward certainty over curiosity, speed over depth, and popularity over truth. A politician who confidently states a falsehood often gets more attention than a cautious expert who hedges their answer with nuance. A viral post full of rage and certainty outperforms a well-researched, balanced perspective. Why? Because human beings are drawn to clarity, even if it's wrong, more than they're drawn to complexity, even if it's right. This distortion is further amplified by how our information systems are built. Think about the platforms we use: Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. None of them were designed to highlight truth. They were engineered to capture attention and keep us scrolling. The algorithms that decide what we see aren't neutral. They're designed to push emotionally charged, engaging content because it increases time on site and boosts ad revenue. In this environment, poor judgment doesn't just survive, it thrives. When people say something feels true, they often mean it aligns with their identity or emotions. But feeling right isn't the same as being right. In fact, research has shown that the more confident someone is in their wrong beliefs, the harder it is to change their mind, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. This is called belief perseverance. It's like wearing emotional armor that turns every attempt at correction into an attack, triggering a defensive response rather than reflection. And this brings us to one of the most insidious aspects of our time: the idea that good intentions are enough. That as long as someone means well, their actions can't be harmful. But history tells a different story. Some of the most devastating outcomes have come not from hate or malice, but from sincerity mixed with ignorance. Consider the witch hunts throughout history, most notably the Salem witch trials. People believed they were protecting their communities, doing moral work. But what they actually did was destroy lives, erode trust, and unravel the social fabric. They weren't trying to hurt anyone. They were afraid. And in their fear, they made choices that devastated their neighbors and families. This same dynamic plays out today, albeit in different forms. A parent who refuses medical treatment for their child because of conspiracy theories. A friend who forwards a misleading video because it seems urgent. A community leader who spreads false data because it feels true to their followers. These people don't see themselves as causing harm. They believe they're doing the right thing. The truth is, fear is one of the most powerful distortions of judgment. When people are scared, whether of disease, economic collapse, or cultural change, they seek answers that provide certainty, and often they'll cling to those answers even when they're false. Fear short-circuits the brain's critical faculties. It narrows focus, eliminates doubt, and makes emotionally satisfying lies more appealing than uncomfortable truths. Modern researchers have uncovered how this happens neurologically. When someone receives information that conflicts with their worldview, the brain's threat detection system lights up. The amygdala activates. The body responds as if under attack. This isn't just a metaphor, this is a physiological response. And in that moment, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning, especially nuanced, slow reasoning, takes a back seat. The result? People reject the facts, not because they're too dumb to understand them, but because their brain interprets the facts as threats. This evolutionary wiring made sense when our biggest threats were predators or rival tribes. But in a world of global networks and complex systems, this kind of black and white thinking leads to disaster. It means people are less likely to question their assumptions and more likely to become radicalized in their beliefs, even if those beliefs are objectively harmful. And here's the dangerous twist. Systems can be designed to exploit this vulnerability. Look at how political campaigns are run. They don't just aim to inform, they aim to evoke emotion, fear of the other side, anger over perceived injustice, nostalgia for a mythic past. These emotional triggers are used not just to persuade, but to bypass rational analysis. The more emotional the messaging, the more likely it is to stick. The same is true in advertising, in news, in social discourse. We are surrounded by content that's carefully crafted not to inform, but to provoke. And that provocation, while profitable for media companies and influencers, is toxic to a society that needs reason and cooperation to survive. Even more disturbing is how people who design these systems often know exactly what they're doing. Engineers create algorithms that reward outrage, not because they're evil, but because they're incentivized to increase engagement. Their success is measured in clicks and views, not in truthfulness or public good. It's the same with financial systems, political structures, even education models. The architecture itself encourages behavior that feels right, but leads to long-term harm. Take the Roman Empire as an example. Leaders repeatedly made the same mistake, devaluing their currency to fund short-term benefits. They knew it was unsustainable, yet each generation continued the pattern, not because they were evil, but because the incentives pushed them toward decisions that brought short-term applause and long-term decay. That's the essence of systemic stupidity. Rational individuals making irrational choices, because the environment rewards those choices in the moment. So how do we fix it? The answer isn't to shame individuals or try to force everyone to become experts in everything. That's unrealistic and unfair. Instead, we need to redesign the systems themselves. We need to stop expecting people to always think clearly and start assuming that, under the wrong conditions, anyone can make destructive decisions. And then we build around that assumption. For instance, in the world of aviation, even the most experienced pilots use checklists, not because they're incompetent, but because they understand that stress and fatigue impair memory and judgment. The checklist isn't an insult, it's protection. It's a humility-based system that acknowledges human limitations. Similarly, Wikipedia requires citations. You can't just write anything and call it truth. The community demands sources. That's not censorship, it's structure. It's a framework that allows collaboration while reducing the damage of individual bias. Another powerful example is the pre-mortem. In business and project planning, this tool forces a team to imagine all the ways a plan could fail before it starts. This isn't pessimism, it's realism. By thinking through failure in advance, teams uncover blind spots while there's still time to correct them. Our best systems don't rely on constant individual brilliance. They rely on structures that reduce the impact of bad decisions. They bake resilience into the process. Think of central banks. They're designed to be insulated from daily political noise so they can make decisions that may be unpopular in the short run, but necessary in the long run. The people running them aren't always right, but the system is structured to protect long-term stability over immediate popularity. That same principle applies to democratic governments. Term limits, independent courts, multiple branches of power, all of these are designed not because we expect perfect voters or leaders, but because we anticipate flaws. These aren't signs of weakness. They're signs of wise design. Markets too, when properly regulated, acknowledge that people will make mistakes. Consumer protection laws, bankruptcy options, and anti-fraud mechanisms don't eliminate poor decisions, but they keep those decisions from turning into national crises. At the core of all of this is a vital insight. The best protection against poor judgment isn't better people, it's better systems. Let's return to a crucial truth. We all at some point fall victim to our own blind spots. The same inner certainty that leads others astray can live within us, hiding in the gaps of our knowledge, tugging us toward choices that feel wise even when they are not. And when we recognize this, not just in others, but in ourselves, we arrive at something essential: intellectual humility. This is not about believing we're stupid or incapable. It's about admitting that regardless of our intelligence or education, we are always capable of being wrong, that our memories are flawed, our perceptions biased, and our reasoning vulnerable to emotion. It's a hard pill to swallow, especially in a culture that rewards confidence and punishes doubt. But it's the only starting point for designing societies that don't crumble under the weight of their own assumptions. One of the great misunderstandings about wisdom is that it means having all the answers. In reality, wisdom is often the ability to pause before assuming you're right, to examine the space between what feels true and what is. It's recognizing that certainty and clarity are not the same, and that sometimes asking the right question matters more than stating the answer with conviction. When Carlo Cipolla laid out his laws, he wasn't making fun of people. He wasn't elevating the intelligent above everyone else. He was drawing a map, one that reveals how even the brightest individuals can make terrible decisions when they mistake their perspective for truth. His work didn't create a hierarchy, it offered a mirror. And when we look into that mirror, the most honest thing we can say is this: none of us are immune. The difference between contributing to progress and sowing chaos often comes down not to brilliance, but to structure, reflection, and restraint. In other words, we need systems that protect people from their own overconfidence. Because here's the hard reality: every system that relies entirely on people being rational will eventually fail. But systems that assume people will often act irrationally and plan accordingly can last. Let's talk about this kind of resilience. A resilient society doesn't expect perfection from its citizens. It expects errors and plans for them. It understands that poor judgment is part of the human experience and designs mechanisms to prevent that judgment from becoming disaster. For example, think about how medicine works. We don't just trust doctors to remember every step of a complex surgery. They follow checklists. Hospitals conduct peer reviews. Procedures are written down and rehearsed. This isn't because doctors are untrustworthy. It's because even the most trustworthy people have bad days, get distracted, or overlook details. The systems catch what the human mind misses, or take bridges and skyscrapers. Engineers don't just design for ideal conditions. They over-engineer for storms, wear, and time. They don't assume that everything will go perfectly. They assume stress will come, and they prepare for it. So why don't we do this more often with our social and political systems? Often it's because we want to believe people will rise to the occasion, that wisdom will prevail, that truth will win out. But hoping for those outcomes is not the same as designing for them. If we want a society that survives its own ignorance, we must embed foresight into our institutions the way engineers embed redundancy into a bridge. The French aristocracy before the Revolution wasn't overthrown because they were monsters. In many cases, they were kind, educated, even generous, but they were trapped in systems they didn't question and made decisions that seemed right in their context but were disastrous in the long run. They confused their privilege with correctness, and they paid the price. And so did millions of others. This is what happens when you live in a system that encourages poor judgment and rewards short-term validation. People act in ways that make sense to them and seem fair on the surface, but are disconnected from reality. And that brings us to the final, most difficult lesson. Good people can, and often do, make terrible decisions. They don't do it out of spite. They do it because they're operating within systems that reward emotion, speed, and tribal loyalty over clarity, patience, and truth. So what can we do? We start by accepting that poor decision-making is not a fringe problem, it's foundational. It lives at the heart of every broken policy, every failed institution, every economic bubble, and every moral panic. When we treat it as a rare flaw, we miss the bigger picture. But when we accept it as a constant, we can finally begin to work with it. Think about the technologies you use every day. The apps you scroll, the news you read, the messages you forward. Are they helping you think more clearly, or are they rewarding your worst mental habits? Are they exposing you to perspectives that challenge your assumptions, or are they walling you into a comforting but dangerous echo chamber? Ask the same about your workplace, your voting habits, your friendships. Are you surrounding yourself with people who tell you what you want to hear, or people who help you see things you might have missed? Because the truth is, resisting poor judgment starts in small places. It starts with curiosity, with asking, what if I'm wrong? With building relationships across differences, even when it's uncomfortable. It starts with rewarding the people who pause and reflect, not just those who speak loudest and fastest. And on a bigger scale, it starts with institutional design, with building systems that don't expect people to be perfect, but protect them when they're not. It means supporting journalism that values accuracy over clicks. It means funding education that teaches critical thinking, not just memorization. It means structuring incentives so that doing the right thing isn't harder than doing the easy thing. It means building firewalls between emotion and action. We also have to rethink how we approach dignity. Respecting someone doesn't mean agreeing with them, and it doesn't mean pretending every opinion is equally valid. It means believing they have inherent worth, even when they're wrong, and holding space for both correction and compassion. Because if we turn every disagreement into a battle for superiority, we lose the chance to bring people along into better ways of thinking. And we have to give ourselves that same grace to realize that we too are sometimes the problem, that we too are capable of reading one article, getting fired up and spreading nonsense, that we too might believe things now that we'll look back on in 10 years and wonder, how did I fall for that? That humility is not weakness, it's strength. It's the only defense against a world where the loudest voice often wins, not because it's wise, but because it's fast. Ultimately, the most hopeful thing we can say is this: we don't have to be perfect to build a better world. We just have to be aware of our imperfections and design wisely around them. We can't eliminate bad judgment, but we can buffer against it. We can't stop every lie, but we can slow its spread. We can't ensure every leader is wise, but we can create systems where unwise leaders can't do too much harm. This is what resilient societies do. They don't chase utopias, they manage risk, they accept that people will falter, and they make sure those falters don't turn into collapses. And sometimes, all it takes is a shift in perspective. A reminder that just because something feels right doesn't make it true. That just because someone means well doesn't mean they're helping. That just because we want to believe something doesn't make it real. The people who will navigate the future most effectively are not those who have all the answers. They are the ones who ask better questions, who stay open, skeptical, and grounded, who know when to speak and when to listen. They will be the ones who design with foresight, lead with restraint, and protect systems from the very human flaws that have toppled empires, bankrupted economies, and fractured communities. And if you're still listening, maybe you're one of them. Maybe you're someone who doesn't just want to be right, but wants to understand. Someone who's willing to do the harder thing, Question your own certainty and invite others to do the same. Because wisdom doesn't spread on its own. It moves person to person, quietly, thoughtfully, and when it's shared not just with information but with care, it can transform a conversation, a decision, a system. So if anything in this resonated with you, if it sparked something you hadn't considered before, pass it on. Not because you're smarter, but because you understand just how fragile smartness can be without reflection, without pause, without humility. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And we need more of it. Desperately.